Are you seeing a slide deck?
Yep.
Okay, that's good. And is it like the size good and all that?
Hmm.
Okay, great. Should I go ahead and start?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hello everyone. My name is Max. My talk is called Real World LiveView. It's going to be a talk about Phoenix LiveView. The subtitle of my talk is How to Deliver 2,500 pounds a week of vegetables without writing any JavaScript. There are two asterisks in the subtitle. I will perhaps talk about why they're there in a minute. All right, let's see what happens if I start going through this. As I said, my name is Max Veytsman. Currently, I'm on leave from being an engineer at GitHub. So over the summer, I was doing a program called the Reeker Center, which is like a magical, self-driven retreat for programmers to work on whatever you want. Basically, normally it's in New York City. In the times of COVID, it is fully remote. And I spent a lot of my time there working on Elixir things. And one of the main things that I've been working on is technology powering something called the Toronto Bike Brigade. And by the way, you're totally welcome to unmute yourself. I'll be trying to watch the chat, but you can interrupt me and I will take questions at the end. But you can also ask them while I'm talking, especially if I go over code way too quickly. So what is the Toronto Bike Brigade? It's a volunteer organization that mobilizes people on bikes in Toronto to support our communities. And largely that means utilizing like volunteer cyclists to deliver essential items. And one of our like biggest, customers, clients, our biggest partners organizations is FoodShare, for which we've been delivering quite a lot. FoodShare, if you're not familiar with, they have a for-profit side where they'll sell boxes of vegetables, and they also will provide boxes of vegetables for people in need. If you ever like used a CSA or something like Mama Earth Organics, like FoodShare is like that, but I think a lot better because they have this very nice charitable aspect to it. This is kind of the office that we run out of it. The guy on the left is Dave, the biking lawyer, advertising his biking lawyer shop, who got this all started maybe in like February or March. And it was kind of rolling along on a bunch of Google Sheets. And I joined in early May, around the same time as I started at Recurse. So these are the FoodShare boxes. So each of these boxes is between, I was debating with some of the other volunteers today how much they weigh. This is why there's an asterisk in the 2,500 pounds line. They're between 10 and 20 pounds of veggies. We're doing up to 125 deliveries every Tuesday. Usually between 50 and 60 bikers will bike them all around downtown Toronto. This is our command center in the office. We just like pack this thing full of these boxes. And you can see we'll have people with trailers. This person is on their phone figuring out where they're gonna go. That's a preview of the technology side of this talk. Some people have like very serious trailer setup. I think he's got 6 or 7 on there, and he's just gonna go. Some people just have like a backpack. Foodora, as you probably know, left Canada, and somehow the Bike Brigade has acquired a lot of Foodora backpacks that we've rebranded as our own. Some people will just like put it in a basket. That's also a photo of Jenna. I'm not sure if she's here, but she has been helping with the coding side a lot as well. And then my job is to kind of take a lot of breaks, not do a lot of work during the delivery, and do a lot of the coordination and telling people where to go, and build the text. And I'm standing next to Melissa, who may also be here, who is doing a lot of the logistic stuff as well, and also does quite a few deliveries. I've done 1 or 2 myself. And yeah, a lot of this, the way this is all powered is via sending SMS messages to people. So how this is all put together is Bike Brigade does like a lot of things, but I'm just going to describe the flow for this FoodShare because it's like 125 boxes. They all go out on the same day. It's like a pretty good test case to model a system on. So FoodShare is going to give us a spreadsheet of a lot of delivery addresses. They're going to pick some subset of their addresses, usually downtown. We have writers sign up to say that they want to do a delivery on a certain day. Right now, we're handling this via Google form just because I haven't implemented a good like writer-facing view of the dispatching system. And then we match them with deliveries. We know where the writers live. We also know how much they're willing to carry. Like that guy 3 slides before can like take 6 boxes. Most regular people can like take 1 because they don't have a cool trailer. And then the day before, the writers will receive a text message with like detailed instructions about where to go. And then throughout the day, if they have any questions or problems, Melissa, myself, and some other volunteers will be available via text. They'll also tell us that they finished the delivery via text, and we have like a little interface to like say that it's done. So then we can go back to FoodShare and say that, you know, we've delivered these boxes and these boxes we weren't able to deliver. So this is kind of the part of the interface that I want to talk about. So this is the live messaging view of the dispatcher side of the dashboard. And you can see it looks like what you would expect like a Facebook Messenger or like a texting thing to work. So on the left, I'm getting a list of all of the different writers and sort of I see the last message from them. On the right, I can have an ongoing conversation with a writer. And I maybe over like blurred stuff just to like try to keep people's names out of it, but you can imagine that there are names and boxes of text where there's blurry things. So this is almost entirely in LiveView. I basically like today, LiveView is shipping inside of Phoenix. So you can just go ahead and create an app with LiveView, everything. And I decided to dive in and go for it. I'm going to talk about like my experience doing it. I'm going to talk about the design of the messaging part and a few other things. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about LiveView internals because I found that I didn't really get it until I started digging into it. So I'm going to hope to like maybe go a little bit deeper into internals than most like LiveView intro talks. So what is Phoenix LiveView? I think that most people here probably, I don't know if you've used Phoenix, but you probably are familiar with Phoenix being the Elixir web framework. It's very like Rails-ish in its design. LiveView is part of Phoenix. This now ships by default, although it is a lot more alpha than Phoenix itself. And the idea of LiveView is that like, whereas in something like Rails, you're gonna write like you have your models, you have your views and controllers. In Phoenix, you have, you have schemas, you have controllers, you have templates. In LiveView, the template, like the LiveView is gonna basically, you render a template on the server. You write code in a specific way to react to events. Those events change the assigns, like the state that the template renders from, and that's it. Like there's no front end. You basically just have a template and some event handlers, and you're doing all of the heavy lifting that you would normally be doing in something like React or Ember entirely through LiveView. So there is a JavaScript component to LiveView. It is the JavaScript client that ships with LiveView that does a lot of magic to like kind of hide this all from you. So this is like a very bare bones LiveView. It's basically, these are like the, I guess the skeletons of the things that you need to implement to get one. So the second line there, use Bike Brigade Web LiveView. If we had a controller, we would be writing controller there instead of LiveView, template, etc. So we have a LiveView and we need to know how to mount it. And what we're saying, this is similar to a mount in something like React. It's basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna set up your state. Here you're using assign. So each LiveView handler is gonna take some parameters and it's gonna take a socket and it's gonna return a tuple that contains a status and a modified socket. So in this case, in our mount, we're gonna like assign our initial state to the socket. We might have a handle params. So this is if you think about like a page where I have a get parameter, I might assign some state based on those params. That's what this would look like. And then we can handle events. And I'll show you how to trigger events, but basically like, I don't know, you might have an event like a click and you're gonna change the state in some And then the one part that I didn't mention is that there's also a template. There's two ways to write a template. You can either put it in a file called the name of your LiveView.lex.html, or you can just put it straight in the LiveView in a render function, and you use this ~l sigil to be able to return HTML, and it knows how to handle these like the at values come from the assigns. I think in like regular Phoenix, you get the at values for like stuff that comes out of your view. Here it's a little different, and it's basically everything that's in a sign is an at variable. So to kind of set this up, I'm going to show you like the most basic intro LiveView example, and this is just a counter. We're going to have a counter with a button that increments. So we have three functions here. We have a render, a mount, and a handle event. So the render is probably the most straightforward one. I return some HTML. I have a button. The button's value is increment counter. You'll see here there's a phx click attribute on it, which is a special LiveView thing, and that's the event that will get triggered when you click that button. I also have an h1, and it's just showing me I'm interpolating the value of the counter here. So when I mount, mount is going to return OK followed by a socket. And in this case, I'm going to assign the socket the value of 0 to counter because I'm starting to count at 0. And then I'm going to, when I increment the counter, when I handle that event, this function takes a socket and it's going to return a no reply. This is like, if you're seeing this no reply a lot, you're thinking like, this kind of looks like a gen server because it is. So we are doing like a gen server thing. We're saying no reply, and here's the new value of our state. And we're assigning the value to counter of the thing that was encountered before, which it lives in socket.assigns, and we're incrementing it. And now I will show you this counter. Okay. So I'm going to click this button. My counter incremented to 1. I'm going to click it again. My counter incremented to 2. You've probably seen a counter demo like this before. One thing that I really like and got me really far in figuring out LiveView is that you can actually enable debug output and see what's being sent down the wire. So in the console, I'm going to call livesocket enable debug. And now when I click this button, it's going to actually tell me what is being sent down the wire. And this is the part where I want to go into a little bit of internal. So I'll show you what these messages are actually like. So when we first mounted this counter, our very first message after we finished rendering the HTML was this blob of JSON right here. And you'll see that it's got two keys. The first key is 0, and the second key is S. And S stands for statics. This is the static content of our template. And this is actually a list. You'll see the first part of the list is a bunch of HTML that goes from the button up to the div, up to the closing of the first div. Sorry, up to like the opening div of what's inside the counter. And then the second part is the closing of the div. And if we go back to look at our template for a second, you'll see that, where did my template go? If you just like scan this up until you get to the first interpolation, which would be the, the percentage with the equal sign, that's the first part of the static. And then the second part is what comes after it. So what we're basically doing is we're like creating a list of all the static parts, and in between of all the static parts is some place where that we interpolated a value. This is very similar if you ever like dug into how Phoenix, it's like templates are rendered. This is very, very similar, but we're doing a little bit more magic here. So the idea is that to render this, I have these two statics and the 0th position between them. So I'm going to take this list of statics, and then all of the content I'm just going to put in the list by just like merging them together. I take a static, I take something else, and then I know where to put the things. So the 0th position in this list is exactly where I want the value of the counter to be. It's after I open the div and before I close it. So now I in order to update this, I just have to say that the thing that was in the 0th position before was the string 0. When I incremented the counter the first time, I'm going to change that string to be 1. And that's it. Like, as I keep clicking the button, I will, I'll put a 1 in the 0th place, I'll put a 2 in the 0th place, et cetera, et cetera. So the next thing we want to do is we want to render a list. So we're going to have a template that looks something like this. You have a button. We have a div that's a container for a list. And then we're going to have a comprehension, a for loop. And for every item in our list, we're going to have a div. We're going to give the div the ID of the item. It's very important for divs to have unique IDs when you're working with LiveView. So our items are just going to be numbers. We'll give it the div and the content of the item. And then we're going to do pretty much the same thing. So when we mount it, we have a socket. We're going to put the value of an empty list into list. We're going to put a value. We want to know what our last index was, so we're going to put 0 there. And then every time I click the button to add an item, I'm going to take the value in next index. I'm going to put, so I'm going to append to the end, I'm going to append that number, and then I'm going to increment the number again. So now I'm kind of like adding, I'll have a list of like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And hopefully this is in fact what will happen. So I'm going to click this button. So I have a 0. Now I have a list 0, 1, and et cetera, and I can keep going. So if we look at the mount again, our initial JSON looks almost the same. You'll just see that the div IDs are different, but we still have like 2 statics, and there's nothing in between them, so it's just an empty string. When we click once, that's when a little bit more magic happens. So in this case, instead of just putting a string in 0, like we did with the counter where we put 1, we're actually putting another object. This object has its own list of statics, and it also has a dynamic part. And the dynamic part is, because you're inside of a comprehension, you're basically, you might like draw the same thing over and over again. So what you're saying here is that take these statics, and for every item in the dynamic part, fill them in, kind of like you would a for loop, which is what this is. So here the static part is 3 things. So we have our div up to setting the ID, then we're closing the div, and then we're closing the first div tag, and then we're closing the div itself. And you'll see that our dynamic part is actually a pair of zeros, because we were using 0 both for the ID of the div and for the content inside of it. So that's what happens when you have 1 item. When you have 2 items, you actually don't have to send the static part down again. We already know in the client that how to draw this particular div. We're just saying like the dynamics now have 2 items in them. And as we keep clicking, we're sending more and more stuff down, which is kind of a problem. We're sending too much data down. So we'd like to only be able to send the differences. And the way that Phoenix handles this is with this PHX update attribute. So normally, if you change some value, we're going to redraw everything. With a PHX update, I'm saying, if you get new dynamics in here, actually, I just want you to put those divs, in the case of append at the bottom. I could also do something like prepend, well, they'll get put at the top. And so the way that I would call into this is now, instead of sending the full list every single time, redrawing all of it, when I click my event handler, I'm going to give it a list that only contains the new one. And I'm going to say there's this third optional argument to the return of mount, which is temporary assigns. And I'm saying that like this list, after you've done drawing it, forget what was in it. It's temporary, set it back to be an empty list. And then the client knows that if it sees this PHX update append, it's only going to append things to it, and it's not going to erase things. And we can see the way that that would render, the demo is going to look identical to the one that I just showed you. But the way that it's going to render is I start with the same set of statics that I did before. My first message is exactly the same. I have the statics that are drawing the inner div. I have 2 zeros here. And then my update is just the dynamics 1.1. And then I just get 2.2. And I'm just on the client side, just drawing, like this appending is happening on a DOM level. And that was it. That's basically all you need to know to build a live messaging app with LiveView. You just have to sprinkle in some Twilio, because like the blog in 15 minutes of Elixir is a messaging app. But I'm going to show you some of the parts of the messaging app as well. Mattia, how am I doing for time?
Oh, you're fine. You have at least 15 more minutes. So
okay, amazing, great. So let's actually like build the working part of the messaging app and make these things work. I don't know why oh, I was going left instead of right. Okay. So one nice thing is like, this is all super built in. So Phoenix ships with generators for LiveView. So you can like make a brand new Phoenix app and you can run your generator. And if you've made Phoenix apps before, you might write like gen.html. In this case, you're going to do gen live. And I'm going to say my context is messaging. My structure name is SMS message. My ecto table name is SMS underscore messages. And then I kind of give it the list of fields. So I have, I have a from, which is a string. This is like the phone number. I have a to, which is a string. I have a body. I'm going to store the date that it's sent. And I'm going to store some ID into Twilio, just for completionist's sake. And this is going to like spit out a bunch of stuff. And I always like looking at the files that my generators create to like thinking about how it wants you to structure the app. So you'll see that it made a show and an index LiveView. It made some form components for us. It made a template for the show and the index. And then it made some modals. It made a migration for us. It injected the context stuff into messaging for like, listing and adding these SMS messages. It made some tests, which LiveView testing is a very fascinating topic that I will talk about in another talk. And then it tells us to like add these routes. And these are like more routes than I would expect, because we have like the index view, and then there's the second parameter, which is called the live action. So we have like an index view with an index, a new, and an edit action. And we have a show view with a show and an edit action. And this is just like, it builds you the default template to like demo some like nice LiveView things, which is that like you could be on an index page and you might want to just like edit something in the list. Or you would actually go into the show page and edit an item specifically. So this is like, like the live action part is something that I hadn't seen before. And it's kind of like it kind of corresponds to routing in a single page application. Like if you think about this being like an SPA on a server, you would have like routes within your SPA, and that's what the live action is sort of related to, or a copy of, I guess. So we need to put like a few functions in our context for this to work, if we don't understand the code. So oh, here we go. So the first thing is that we have all these SMS conversations. I want to get, for that left view where I see like the name of every rider and their most recent message, I'm going to build a query that is going to give me every rider and paired with the latest message that I got from them. And I'm just going to return that list of pairs. So we're going to call these SMS conversations. That's going to be to render one side of it. And then to render the other side for an actual rider's conversation is I want a function that takes a rider struct and it just gives me back all of their messages ordered by the sent at time. So to mount this live view, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to just pull in all the conversations. So this is going to be this pairs of rider and last message, and we're going to assign it to the socket. I'm also going to do this like temporary assigns with the current conversation, which we'll get into in a minute. So here's where there's a nice pattern that that Phoenix leads you to when it generates this code. It really wants you to, they really want you to make an apply action method, sorry, an apply action function, and separate the way that you handle different live actions into kind of separate handlers. So when I handle params, I'm going to pick the right apply action based on the live action. And in this thing, I had an index and a show. And what I want to do is I want to be able to go to my messaging page, and I want to have a set URL for any writer. So if I go to /messaging/ like 123, I'll see the messages for the writer ID 123. But if I just want to go to the messaging page, I should probably see whoever like the last writer I talked to's messages. So index is when I would go to /messaging, and then show is when I would go to /messaging/ID. So in the case of show, I'm going to get a writer by their ID from the database, and I'm going to call into assign conversation. And I'll show you what that does in a second. In the case of index, I'm going to figure out my first writer. I'm just going to take the top of the list, and I'm going to assign a conversation of that writer. And then what I do in assign conversation, this is another pattern, is where you might have like 50 things in your state. So I find a really good pattern is to have functions called assign something that handle some like subset chunk of assigning state into your socket. And in this case, I want to do everything that has to do with that particular writer's conversation. So I want to get their conversation, all of their messages. And then I want to create a change set for them. I think this line actually doesn't matter. We can get rid of it, but I want to get a change set for them. And then I put all that into the socket. So we've built up our state. Now we write like a very simple template for this thing. So basically, it's exactly the same thing that I wrote for a list with a button where I add something else to the list. I have this conversations assigns. It's a list of pairs of writer and their last message. I'm going to create a list item, and in the item, I'm going to have their name. I'm going to have the last message, the sent at of their last message, and the body. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this clickable. So live patch is also a thing that comes with LiveView. This is an equivalent to a link, but instead of like sending a GET request, it's going to, this is like a turbo links kind of link, right? Like it's going to re-render the next LiveView, but it's not going to actually do a full round trip request. It's going to do it over a WebSocket the way that you would if you just sent an event. And by the way, yeah, again, if there's any like questions about, or I'm going too fast, like please stop me in the chat or unmute. So that is a very good question. Does the interaction with LiveView get tripped up during new code deploys? I think that I think that it has some way of like refreshing, like forcing a refresh every now and then. And if you have like a blue-green deploy and I guess if you have a deploy and you're closing off your connections, you would probably end up forcing a refresh on the client side. But I can imagine that if you're in the middle of something very interactive, bad things would happen. So maybe my answer to you is I do not know. So the next thing I want to talk about is actually separating state into components. because this is starting to get complicated. We have this like list of messages. We have a list of writers, so we can click on them to see what messages we have from them. We also have a list of messages. So we want to pull that out into a component. And components are, again, this is all very like modeled over the vocabulary if you've done SPA type stuff. So it's kind of like a React component. It's going to separate concerns. It's going to live inside of the LiveView process. So as I kind of mentioned, and I think it is kind of important to understanding this, LiveViews are every user's LiveView is its own process, is a gen server. Your component isn't going to spawn a new process because that would just explode. It's going to live inside of the parent process, but there's a way of routing events to different components. And you can handle state inside of your component. Like your component can be responsible for fetching its own state, or you can like assign some state to the component, and then it will, and like your parent LiveView handles all of the state. And this is kind of something I've run into where in the JavaScript framework world, there's a lot of different ways of handling state. And there's these like, my mind is blanking. Like there's stuff like Vuex, and there's the React equivalent I'm really forgetting right now, but like there's ways of having this tree of state and figuring out how to give state to components. This is still under like development in the Phoenix LiveView world. And I think that there aren't super good patterns that people have agreed on how to do, like where the state should live and how to send state between things. I'm going to show you one of the ways of passing state into components, but I have not found it like very clear how I should actually structure my state. So we have this component, and the first thing the component needs to do is render itself. So in this case, instead of a live view, we have a live component. And it knows how to render a conversation. And this is like the exact kind of code that we've written before. We have a for loop. We have a list of messages. For each message, we're going to draw the message, tell you its body. We're going to change the color here based on whether whether the message is from the writer or from us. And we're going to draw a little form. And here's the PHX target thing. I want the form, instead of going to the parent LiveView process, I want the form to actually be handled by my component. So I'm going to target myself. And then I just handle the send event. So to send, I'm going to get this event inside of my component. It's going to have some parameters because it's like from the form. And I'm just going to send it. And sending it is going to just call out into Twilio. So here, if I can successfully, I'm going to call out, send SMS message is going to send the message. If I successfully do it, I'm going to update my state to like give me a blank form again, empty change set, empty message. If I have some error, I'm going to set an error on the change set, and hopefully the user will see it displayed to them. And this is pretty much all we need to build a form that lets us send SMS messages, except we're not receiving messages in any way. And also, you probably noticed, actually maybe you not, because I went through this quickly, when we update the state, I'm setting an SMS, I'm setting the change set, but I'm not actually changing the list of messages. Like I'm never putting the message I just sent into the list and updating it. And this is because I'm not adding the new message to the list here. What I'm doing is I'm going to use PubSub, and I'm going to do a quick aside. I'm actually not going to go through this code in the interest of time, but what you need to know is that Twilio is going to send us a webhook. So we have a controller that every time we get a message coming sent to us from Twilio, it's going to hit this controller, and this controller is just going to save that message to the database. And even harder than the messages that I send myself is like, how do I, like if somebody's looking at the page in a live view, how do I update the state? So this is like the magical part, which I think like really makes this super powerful, and it's PubSub. And Phoenix provides PubSub messages where you can just send arbitrary tuples. And any process can subscribe to a PubSub topic and handle it with handle info. And LiveView is a process, which means that we can just create a a topic when new messages are created, subscribe all of our live views that are currently looking at the messaging page, and they will get messages on, they will get pub sub messages on new message creation. So basically the pattern, it's really good. It's not super well documented. I've seen this in like a video, but like the pattern is that you take your context and you create a broadcast, which takes the results of repo insert. So in this case, it's going to take either an error and a reason or an OK and a struct. And then it's going to, if the struct was successfully saved, like if we successfully created the message, we're going to broadcast a new message saying that we created an SMS message. And then we're just going to return the thing that we got so that it's like passing through in this chain here. So we're going to broadcast every time that we create a message from our context. And we're going to give the ability of our view to subscribe. And all I do is I subscribe using Phoenix PubSub, and I give it the name of my topic, which is just the string messaging. And then when I mount my live view, I do messaging.subscribe. And now, every time a message is created, I get a handle info telling me that a message was created. And I do two things. I know that I need to redraw the full list on the left because before, like maybe Jenna had messaged me like hours ago, but now her name should be at the top. So I have to redraw that full list. If the message that I got is for the writer that I'm currently looking at, I need to update that component to draw the message. And this is one of the tools of component communication. And I find this like a little bit ugly. Basically, I'm going to say, I'm going to send an update to that component, and I'm going to tell it the component with the selected writer ID, and I'm going to say that set your conversation to be this message. And I use temporary assigns there, so it's just going to append that to the bottom of my list. That was it for building the thing. I have a couple problems and future work, and I don't have time to get into this deeply, but one is like doing all of this. I found a DOM memory leak when using PHX update append, which I think is very interesting, and I would like to talk about another time. It is now fixed. I feel really good about that. The other is like, I alluded to this a slide ago, reordering is kind of impossible. If I'm not sending a full list down saying like, hey, the element, like, can you delete this element or can you reorder this element when I'm using PHX update append, doesn't really exist yet, but we're working on it. And through building all this, I started contributing to LiveView. So in fixing my own DOM memory bugs, I've gotten a sense of how to add that. And I hope to at least be able to remove stuff in PHX update append pretty soon. Reordering might be more tricky. Those are my two main gripes.